Welcome to the 15th exchange of ideas, the 15th set of ideas that we are exchanging as we now come to the well-being curriculum. So, in this part of the well-being curriculum, this will be the first part among the series of the Sahana Vavtu approach. We begin the well-being curriculum's first part. The well-being curriculum is a gestalt of philosophy and practices that gives society a sense of security. We saw that evidence in the last 4 sessions. And what was the evidence? It was the evidence of application of ancient wisdom's ideas that create well-being. In giving this evidence, we discovered the dimensions of well-being itself. What is really well-being? The current academic content was used in education in the evidence. So the educational institutions that we talked of and we showed in the evidence were not using some rocket science or some academic curriculum which was very far away. Not at all. It was using the same academic curriculum that is being currently taught. That's our evidence. The well-being curriculum is based on the gestalt of a philosophy and its practices. That is the ideas that interpret the curriculum. It's not so much we are finding that the curriculum is the cause of the problem. It is the interpretation of the ideas that are emerging from the curriculum that may have caused the problem. So studying this evidence raised a question. Graduates from these educational institutions are not given campus placement. Instead, they are asked to be self-confident and seek their own placement. Then the question raised is the current focus on income as a determinant of well-being based on removing a fear of the future? So if that becomes the primary motivator during education years, is that the reason why some educated persons are willing to compromise the moral fabric to increase profits for their companies even by harming customers? The experience of 2008, which led to changing the goal by OECD, is the reason for raising the question. Senior managers who were highly educated from most reputed institutions of the world sold derivatives which caused the crisis. Is income the security that is sought from education? Or can education be pursued as an end in itself? Can education itself be the security for living life? Can education be so empowered to provide that sense of security? If so, what is that one focus of education that can provide security and a gestalt of philosophy and practice? So the fear versus security is the challenge for education. Can education create a sense of security that graduating students are filled with self-confidence? This is not a criticism of the campus placement system. Instead, it is a case that the choice of a college or the pressure on the educational institution should not be based on that. Inability to get good placements for students is also a fear among educational institutions themselves. Why not make them confident of what they are teaching? Ancient wisdom is about overarching all fears. It only incorporates one fear, that is the fear of doing actions which are not righteous. Education should give the biggest security, the security with which you live life. The impact of fear on humans makes them revert to animal instincts. Dr. Thierry Stamer discusses in Dialogues of Clinical Neuroscience and quotes researchers from Neurosci Behave Review that, and I quote, that human defensive behaviors to threat scenarios are not unlike those seen in non-human mammals. So in a in a threat scenario, the human behavior and the mammal behavior is quite similar. So should education be based on fear? If the basic emotion that is guiding students and administrators of the education system is not addressed, social pain will be created. Ancient wisdom's first principle is to reduce those behavior patterns that animals have, whose remnant has been left within the human beings. It declares the distinction of humans from the animal world. Animals use sense perception and intelligence of a certain type. It therefore, the ancient Indian education or ancient wisdom's education goes beyond sense perception and imparts discrimination for the use of the brain. Not just intelligence. How to direct the intelligence is discrimination. This directs the use of intelligence in a manner that creates well-being, not just seeking immediate sense gratification, which animals also seek. If this is not clear, the purpose can never be achieved. This is not to say that campus placement should be stopped. No, not at all. That's not the argument we are giving. Let it not be misinterpreted like that. Instead, it is to make a point that the responsibility of education is to create an emotion of security by imparting the basis of wisdom which gives discrimination along with knowledge which is currently used only with intelligence. So we observed from the evidence given earlier in the 4 sessions that the focus of actions of graduating students who use ancient wisdom was very different. Economic policies today proudly seek to revive what they call the animal spirits in the economy. Is this a mindset of dog-eat-dog competition? Will it make humans live a dog's life too? The 2008 crisis occurred despite the brightest minds taking decisions. Was this a cause of using intelligence like animals also do? Without discrimination that humans are capable of. Ancient wisdom is about imparting discrimination. Its practices seek the human essence, the spirit of work, not the animal spirit. Is education unable to direct how the mind is to be used? The whole research ethics course thus is designed as a journey of the mind. How the mind can change its course is the challenge its curriculum design seeks to meet. It gives evidence of how the mind can move away from ideas that harm individuals and society's well-being. This involves a new philosophy and generates self-confidence in graduating students in their ability to create unique value for society and therefore themselves too. This is moving away from the desire to create value for themselves first and maybe think of society later. This course raises a key question. Should the graduating student's focus be on income that he or she will earn, or should it be on the possible outcome of actions undertaken? What is the prime motivation? Is it to maximize income for oneself and the company, or is it to see the overall impact that the actions will have in the short, medium and long term on all stakeholders in the system, not just the individual and the company? So what can transform this motivation? Is it theory or is it practice? Should not the use of human intelligence be guided by a sense of discrimination? We conclude that practice of wise philosophical ideas transforms students and processes of value creation. So what were the ideas in the last 150 years that changed human thought and curriculum? Currently, the first way of knowing in education is sense perception. On a utilitarian view, Bertrand Russell wrote to Murray on April 3, 1902, and I quote this: "I judge pleasure and pain to be of small importance compared to knowledge. For many years it seemed to me perfectly self-evident that pleasure is the only good and pain the only evil. Now, however, the opposite seems to me self-evident." Unquote. He goes on to say in the letter, and I quote, that unless the contemplation of eternal things is preserved, mankind will become no better than well-fed pigs. Unquote. There is a feeling here that sense perception cannot be relied upon. Does he mean eternal truths when he talked of internal things? Did his focus on contemplation on eternal things fit in with OECD's focus on contemplation as a part of education? Incorporating it as a part of education? Ancient wisdom's method or methodology uses contemplation on eternal truths. So let's see what the Stanford Encyclopedia writes about Bertrand Russell. We are using only one encyclopedia so that all our references can easily be checked, and we are only using one source so that we are not trying to play with too many sources to confuse an issue. We have taken one evidence, we are taking one source, and we are sticking to it throughout. So this Stanford Encyclopedia writes about Bertrand Russell, and I quote, "It is only very recently, in the last 15 years or so, that ethical theorists have begun to pay attention to him." Unquote. So the idea of sense perception, the idea of contemplation on eternal things, etc., now may be gaining ground. So we are at the right time. The encyclopedia says that Russell was dissatisfied with what he said on philosophical basis of ethics, and I quote, "The fact that he did not think much of his own contributions does not mean that he thought them any worse than anybody else's." Unquote. Everybody was, he felt, not clear about ethics. And the encyclopedia quotes Russell, and I quote, "When it comes to the philosophy of moral judgments, I am impelled into two opposite directions and remain perplexed." So he is himself, unquote, he is himself propelled into two opposite directions. Wisdom cannot afford to be perplexed when teaching students. It has to impart very clear ideas of the basis of ethics. Morality and ethics is about studying outcome of actions. This is what ancient wisdom concludes. It is a broad vision that looks beyond sense gratification and the principle of pleasure that sense organs may direct us to initially. Just as Bertrand Russell said that for many years it remained self-evident to him that pleasure is the only good and pain the only evil. It probably seemed that the same to managers in 2008, that pleasure is the only good. So is Russell's contention that the opposite seems self-evident the hidden truth that OECD is seeking now? If so, it will have to turn the idea of sense perception upside down, and we have to believe in a different way out. But one thing is clear, the encyclopedia says, and I quote, "However pleasurable the life of a pig may be, Russell would not have preferred the life of a pig to that of a human being." Unquote. The human brain is the greatest gift we have. How it is used may change. Its intelligence is found in animals too. Wisdom imparts it with a sense of discrimination that to lead to right conclusions for actions. We have quoted a lot of Bertrand Russell. This is the same Bertrand Russell who commented that Hegel's stupidity in mathematics turned him away from Hegel. In the earlier lectures we said that. Terry Pinkard writes that Russell hasn't studied Hegel properly. He has only read his lecture notes. Professor Pinkard argues for their total reassessment. This brings us to our disclaimer. What are we trying to say? Our disclaimer is that we do not criticize individuals but look at the perspectives they share. Our interest is to take the best ideas for a curriculum designed to create well-being. We learn from the dissatisfaction with current ideas and share the solutions of ancient wisdom. We conclude that wisdom does not emerge from theoretical formulations, but it emerges from practice of ethics in daily life. Ethics uses discrimination. This is how well-being was created in our evidence. We also conclude that it boils down to the income versus outcome debate of the last 4 sessions. These emerged from the 4 human values of the earlier 2 sessions. These values emerged from the search of what went wrong with human thought in the 4 sessions that preceded these 2. Our long journey over 14 sessions for a curriculum design sees how the brain should use ideas. They should not just be used with animal instincts or animal spirits or such intelligence alone which is shared by animals, but they should be used with discrimination, which implies the use of ethics. Such a journey must therefore include understanding the current understanding of the human brain and its use. So let us ask some relevant questions and wisdom's answer to these questions. There are 2 entities researched in academics, and these entities are the brain and the mind. So here's our question. Should the mind direct the brain or the brain direct the mind? Does our curriculum using sense perception discriminate? Does it ask this question? Does it seek an answer? Does it find a way, a method, a methodology for ethics to emerge? If the human mind, guided by sense perception, directs the brain, what happens? If the brain directs the human mind, what happens? What is the difference? Also, will the brain be guided by animal spirits or will it use discrimination from ethics? These are the questions. Behind the obvious questions, many processes that are not obvious are hidden. We must explore them. Why did we discuss Russell's evolution of thought? Firstly, because philosophy is a dominant force in the way ideas are understood and applied. This is what we found. Russell was a philosopher in the last 150 years, which is OECD's time frame given to us linking education to social pain. We have seen that Russell's thought has evolved over time. Earlier, it was self-evident to him that pleasure is the most desirable thing. Later, he thought the opposite. Is OECD having the same evolution? Does a holistic view of well-being use discrimination? Was it found missing in 2008? If sense organs are the primary way of gaining knowledge, is the mind likely to direct the brain accordingly? It will then be self-evident to the brain to seek pleasure and income in its use. But Russell's brain after some time thought that pleasure and pain are of small importance as compared to knowledge. Knowledge is outcome, not income. Does this imply that sense perception is meaningless when knowledge is to be sought? Therefore, income should not be a consideration during education years. If this is true, it makes the very first way of knowing in our current curriculum as misleading. If the human brain uses misleading signals to act, social pain will definitely be created. OECD's search and ancient wisdom thus begin here. But will current research help us with some evidence to back such a search for a new curriculum? Can current research on the brain and the mind in academics help us? Fortunately for us, academic ideas have progressed far beyond the concept of scientific materialism that the brain secretes thoughts as the liver secretes bile. What is the philosophy that will be formed by integrating the latest research? from what point of view will future academic ideas be shaped? This is the task we address. Will we continue to remain in the we don't know state of mind that Professor Chomsky of MIT says that scientists have fallen into? What will such insecurity do to the human mind and the brain, where we are all the time admitting we don't know? Or can ancient wisdom transform that state of mind into we now know, or we will know through our experience, or we will try to attain that experience through which we know? Till income was chased, well-being did not result. Will income emerge naturally from well-being that is created by the application of wisdom in meeting human needs? Will such a self-confident state of mind not live in the fear of the future to plan for income even before gaining knowledge? You haven't gained knowledge about how to earn income, but you have planned the income that you want. So where is the focus? Or will we continue to gain only such knowledge in our universities that hopefully gives income? Will this self-confident search of truth create individuals who seek well-being for all instead? Instead, can we try to do that? Will such a well-being be directed by the mind and brain evaluating outcomes of actions? Will education impart such discrimination to the instruments of the mind and the brain? Will that be the focus of a new curriculum design, or will it be a fear-based approach of searching for income without thought of outcome of human actions? Research needs direction. Who will give it? What will give it? How? Only a new curriculum can. A philosophy gives direction to research. The work ethic of researcher emerges from it. So does their method of working and explaining the results. It will create the new frame of mind that Einstein says is needed to solve a problem created by the earlier one, the earlier frame of mind. Therefore, a course on research ethics using research methodology is needed. It will transform the way ideas are formulated, researched, understood, explained, and applied in life and at work. Outcomes link work and life. Income could not establish the link, for when income was sought as the primary objective of learning, exploring, researching, application in the last 150 years created social pain. Will a sense perception based way of knowing now guide research and its interpretation? Or will new concepts be developed that are beyond sense perception but are solely in the area of transforming the quality of human experience? These can impart discrimination. What if experience, as shown in our evidence, cannot be measured but is still true? What is the quality of experience that is acceptable? What is the way to judge which experience should be used for application? Wickedness is also an experience, just as altruism is. So, what are the current ideas of well-being? Let's explore further. Firstly, as the OECD wishes to create well-being, we need to know the academic understanding of well-being. We have already seen how in practice ancient wisdom would implement ideas of well-being. That's ancient wisdom. Also, the evidence exists how ancient wisdom's education would prepare future workforce, ensuring that these wise ideas that impart discrimination are practiced for decades in a self-sustaining way. We believe that well-being emerges from practices of the mind and intellect that transform the human heart. However, let us see the current understanding of well-being in general in academics and by eminent practitioners. Among the practitioners, His Holiness the Dalai Lama often begins his speech by saying that we all want to be happy. That's currently. In the past, Bertrand Russell too says, and I quote him, "The good life as I conceive it is a happy life," unquote. Therefore, the idea of well-being and happiness merge. So let's go to what academic theory says. Again, let's go back to that one source we refer to all the time, to avoid all confusion in interpretations and trying to use different sources of research just to prove our point. No, we'll stick to one source of research. Let's look at the Stanford Encyclopedia again, and I quote the encyclopedia. It says, I quote, well-being is most commonly used in philosophy to describe what is non-instrumentally or ultimately good for a person. It is of great importance in moral philosophy, especially in the case of utilitarianism, according to which the only moral requirement is that well-being be maximized. It has become standard to distinguish theories of well-being as either hedonistic theories, desire theories, or objective list theories. According to the view known as welfarism, well-being is the only value. Also important in ethics is the question of how a person's moral character and actions relate to their well-being, unquote. Can single-minded hedonism lead to long-term happiness? What lessons have we learned from 2008? Is 2008 going to give us any indication whether we should continue to follow single-minded hedonism? Can satisfying unlimited desires lead to well-being? Economics is thought to be a science which helps choose how to satisfy unlimited desires with limited means. The science of choosing the desires. Means or income seem to be the method to limit desires. Wisdom's method is to use inner discipline or discrimination to limit them by finding out which are the righteous desires. Its practices enable this. This is the key difference of its approach with modern education. The restriction of desires makes us question and find out which are the righteous desires to have and which are the desires which we can sacrifice when the time arises and if the need arises for others and society. So wisdom's method is to use that inner discipline. Its practices enable this discipline. This is the key difference in its approach with modern education. The difference is executed by practices of wisdom, not theory. Thus we ask you to speak the truth, follow righteous conduct, to experience the difference yourself. The popular use of well-being, according to the encyclopedia, relates to health. OECD brings it to education. The evidence we see is in the area of education, health, and to the most important constituent of the body and the most essential thing needed for survival of the body after air, that is water. So let's again continue to what Stanford Encyclopedia states, and I quote, a person's well-being is what is good for them. Health then might be said to be a constituent of my well-being, but it is not plausibly taken to be all that matters for my well-being. One correlate term worth noting here is self-interest. My self-interest is what the interest of myself and not others. Unquote. I'm repeating the last. One correlate term worth noting here this is Stanford Encyclopedia that I'm quoting, is self-interest. My self-interest is what is in the interest of myself and not others, unquote. It further states, and I quote, happiness is often used in ordinary life to refer to a short-lived state of a person, frequently a feeling of contentment. Philosophically, its scope is more often wider, encompassing a whole life, unquote. The encyclopedia further states, and I quote, over the last few decades, so-called positive psychology has hugely increased the attention paid by psychologists and other scientists to happiness. It is usually understood in terms of contentment or life satisfaction. Is positive psychology about well-being? As yet, conceptual distinctions are not sufficiently clear within the discipline. But it is probably fair to say that many of those involved as researchers or as subjects are assuming that one's life goes well to the extent that one is contented with it. That is, that some kind of hedonistic account of well-being is correct. I'm quoting the Stanford Encyclopedia that some kind of hedonistic account of well-being is correct. Some positive psychologists, however, explicitly reject hedonistic theories in preference to Aristotelian or Edwai-monist accounts of well-being, which are a version of the objectivist theory of well-being discussed. A leader in the field has recently suggested that rather than happiness, positive psychology should concern itself with positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. Unquote. So, this is current theory. Our evidence shows how theory works. This is what theory states, what Stanford Encyclopedia says so much about the theory. But our evidence is showing how it works when practices of ancient wisdom are merged with education. So does the gap in ancient wisdom and current ideas of well-being arise from a gap in practice that leads to a different experience of consciousness? This question needs serious examination. Hence, we are carefully quoting Stanford's encyclopedia. Only one source is used to avoid any confusion or misunderstanding. And the encyclopedia states, and I quote, "It is occasionally claimed that certain ancient ethical theories such as Aristotle's result in a collapse of the very notion of well-being. On Aristotle's view, if you are my friend, then my well-being is closely bound up with yours. It might be tempting then to say that your well-being is part of mine, in which case the distinction between what is good for me and what is good for others has broken down. But this temptation should be resisted. Your well-being concerns how well your life goes for you, and we can allow that my well-being depends on yours, without introducing the confusing notion that my well-being is constituted by yours." Unquote. And I'm repeating the last. The confusing notion that my well-being is constituted by yours. So they call it a confusing notion, that my well-being can be constituted by your well-being. This is where the gap in practice of ancient wisdom and current approach to education is obvious. The inability to experience the well-being of others as part of your own well-being stands the test of current theory. Will it stand the test of ancient wisdom's evidence? Russell's original self-evident view was also that pleasure is the only thing to be pursued, while later he felt that pleasure and pain are irrelevant where pursuit of knowledge is concerned. The first way of knowing or sense perception dictates such dilemmas. Our evidence shows that such dilemma does not exist in practice of many decades. It's not a small phenomena that we've taken. We've taken a phenomena of over many decades. Alexander, who conquered the world, it was a sense perception based victory. It is glorified in every child's mind when teaching history. Ancient wisdom Indian teachers for thousands of years never made or trained their kings to become all-conquering emperors or India to become an all-conquering country. Instead, they taught them to conquer the hearts and loot with love, as Vinoba Bhave did within India. And he took the property from the landlords and gave it to the landless. Africa, which some believe to be the cradle of civilization, shares this approach in what they call Ubuntu, which is, and I quote, "I am because we are." So what is the nature of some current research? We are at a fortunate time in human history where current ideas that are emerging need a philosophy that can encompass their hidden dimensions to create well-being. That they should not suffer the fate of Newton's idea, which Professor Chomsky of MIT says, and I quote, "The properties of matter Newton showed escape the bounds of mechanical philosophy," unquote. Professor Chomsky further states that, and I quote, "It is commonly believed that Newton showed that the world is a machine following mechanical principles, and that we can therefore dismiss the ghost in the machine, the mind, with appropriate ridicule. The facts are the opposite. Newton exorcised the machine, leaving the ghost intact," unquote. What work and data can prevent repeat of such crisis? As the current obsession is with income, which comes from business, let us see facts the world faces here. We saw that how philosophy, even though Newton proved that the laws or properties of matter escape the bounds of mechanical philosophy, Newton proved it. Yet, that's not the way the interpretations came up in his time. So let's see what are how the business, which caused 2008 recession, how do they view philosophy? Professor Sir Gary Cooper is a world-leading expert on workplace well-being and author and editor of over 170 books on organizational psychology and HR. His interview with Work in Mind in 2019 reveals that businesses need to address both physical and psychological work environment to stay ahead. It states, and I quote, UK productivity persistently remains at historically low levels. According to recent figures released by the Office for National Statistics, labor productivity fell at its fastest annual pace in 5 years from April to June, dropping by 0.5%, unquote. Let us examine what UK Office of National Statistics finds, and I quote, 15.4 million work days were lost due to work-related stress, depression or anxiety in 2017-2018, unquote. What is the nature of some curriculum research, current research? Let's continue with that. The statistics relating to mental health are referred to in this interview by Sophie Barton as a stress epidemic, accounting for 57% of all working days lost due to ill health. We have already seen the data on the epidemic in USA. We have seen in an earlier session that Professor Neil Halfon, the director at University of California, UCLA, professor at its School of Medicine, finds that mental, behavioral and developmental problems are at epidemic levels among children in the United States of America. Nearly 3/4 of the cumulative prevalence of mental health problems have their onset before age 25 in USA. This is what evidence has shown. These are the education years. We also found that Professor Tweng of San Diego State University wrote in February 2020 in Physicians Weekly, and I quote, "The epidemic is all too real," unquote. Professor Sir Gary Cooper raises another important issue, that is of presenteeism versus absenteeism. It addresses the duplicity that naturally emerges from the lack of ethics. The need to show that you are present by working unnecessarily shows a duplicity that is inherently ingrained in psychology of workplace now. It shows the extent of mental insecurity. This leads to stress. Long hours, his research proves, damages productivity. Duplicity must be removed. Unity of thought, word and deed is ancient wisdom's practice. It is the solution to removing duplicity in life. It is estimated that 1.5 billion UK pounds are lost every year due to presenteeism from mental ill health, according to Professor Sir Gary Cooper. An alarming study by CIPD revealed it had more than tripled in UK since 2010, but that only a third of employers were acting to reduce it. The UK government publishes quarterly data on well-being, where indicators include anxiety, happiness, life satisfaction, a feeling that things done in life are worthwhile. These are measured over hundreds of thousands of people. The World Economic Forum has an agenda council on mental health which explores the latest strategic trends, research and analysis. It looks into issues of consumerization of mental health, destigmatizing mental health, destigmatizing mental health, the mental health at workplace, genomics and mental health, etc. The Bhutan Declaration in the UN General Assembly, and I'm looking at just the nature of the current research, in the 70s wanted to measure gross national happiness. It is a single number based index based on 33 indicators categorized under 9 domains. It started with 4 pillars: good governance, sustainable socio-economic development, cultural preservation and environmental conservation, and expanded to 9 domains, which are psychological well-being, health, education, time use, cultural diversity and resilience, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity and resilience, and living standards, unquote. If we see closely, we will find that outcomes here seem to be given more importance than income. Living standards are stated last, while good governance, sustainability of society and economy, psychological well-being, health, education, community vitality, etc. are written earlier. 2008 highlighted the need for such a kind of approach. Well-being and mental health are being addressed by research, but are they able to contain what is being called an epidemic? Will adding a different approach help here? Has moving away from the Ubuntu idea of Africa led to a different set of problems? The mental disconnect with co-workers and a deep insecurity has led to mental ill health. Professor Sir Cary Cooper has more to say about the culture that technology has created. He says, and I quote him, "We need to get people to interact more." Sahana Vavtu. Instead of sitting around tables and emailing, don't send emails to people in the same office building. Talk to them instead. Avoid sending emails at night, over weekends, or during holidays until it's absolutely necessary. And don't CC everybody in the world. Everyone CCs in their boss and their boss's boss to cover their backsides, unquote. A deep insecurity behind decision making leads to poor quality of decisions. Passing the buck for failure and trying to grab the glory of victory is the antithesis of the concepts of ancient wisdom or Ubuntu of Africa. Is the nature of recommendations of global well-being experts asking us to revert to ancient wisdom's mindsets? Is the fear of income ingrained deeply during education years, making all insecure about outcome of their decisions? Instead, if education gives self-confidence instead of fear, naturally makes graduating students hold hands to seek rewards, seeking to investigate outcomes of actions instead of focusing only on my income, will all problems disappear? The time may have come to ask such questions if well-being curriculum is to be addressed. So the data from USA and UK shows that mental health is at epidemic levels according to experts. There is a lot of evidence, Professor Sir Cary Cooper states, that stress harms an individual's immune system. His research proves that it causes serious ill health, heart disease, and some research links it to cancer too. He raises the importance of creating a culture with less stress and having a better balance in life. In a video talk with me, he mentioned the importance of treating other people in the same manner as we would like our own children to be treated. This is a very significant statement for an academician to make. So let us repeat what we said a few minutes ago to see the context. Stanford Encyclopedia states, and I quote, "It is occasionally claimed that certain ancient ethical theories such as Aristotle's result in the collapse of the very notion of well-being," unquote. It goes on to say, and I quote, "Your well-being concerns how well your life goes for you. And we can allow that my well-being depends on yours without introducing the confusing notion that my well-being is constituted by yours," unquote. When we say that we should treat other people as we want our own children to be treated, we are contradicting Stanford Encyclopedia statement. When you include others as part of your family in the mind, then the notion that my well-being is constituted by yours comes to life. That is Ubuntu. That is what Ubuntu of Africa states. So can research lead to a global well-being agenda? The OECD and World Economic Forum seek character, values, transformation of attitudes, etc. What prevents the human intellect and the mind from inculcating them? What is lacking in theory? Research shows results that are alarming. The antidote emerges not from theory, but practices of ancient wisdom. is the misuse of digital technology, reversing ideas of working together. Group assignments, the sports in school incorporated this idea. Are we losing it? The idea that of Ubuntu, I am because we are, is outcome based. Is current focus on income as an end result of application of education based on fear of the future? Ancient wisdom's fearlessness is the antidote of stress. It only fears that our conduct should not be unrighteous. That is the fear of wrong outcome of actions, not of less income from them. All practices of ancient wisdom lead to a totally different attitude. Is a recession of the mind into insecurity and stress the cause of economic problems too? Is the lack of each individual's mental and physical well-being resulting in a deep fall in collective well-being of society? Are recession in mental attitudes leading to economic recessions in society? Is research pointing to this? As the focus on income prevails, a focus on business and corporate stress needs attention. A single-minded devotion to income is also sometimes a corporate mindset. If it ignores interest of society, problems like 2008 will occur. It has also led to unrealistic workloads and unmanageable deadlines, Professor Cooper's research finds. He points out to the growing need for emotional intelligence, which is a natural byproduct of wisdom. People skills, his research shows, are equally important as technical skills. Current education awards marks on technical skills. Wisdom's practices that enhance people's skills are needed now. What could have prevented academic theory to ignore these practices and instead insist on creating theories in the names of individuals? Bertrand Russell in his Nobel Prize speech is quoted to have said, and I quote, "The pursuit of knowledge is, I think, mainly actuated by love of power, and so are all advances in scientific technique," unquote. Is misuse of science because of this very attitude that OECD now wants to transform? Why did idealism not work? Russell is quoted as having said, and I quote, "Much that passes as idealism is disguised hatred or disguised love of power," unquote. Need I say more? We witness corporates and individuals with little concern about the impact or outcome of their actions on others in society. Did Russell believe in ancient wisdom when he wrote in the book Human Society in Ethics and Politics, and I quote, "The only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation, and the first step towards cooperation lies in the hearts of individuals," unquote. This brings the focus back to transformation of the human heart. This is the precise target of ancient wisdom's education, which starts with cooperation as in the Sahana Vavtu mantra. We will pursue ancient wisdom's ideas that transform the heart or soften it as we proceed. More research and ideas have emerged recently which can fuse with ancient wisdom. We know that it's not possible to drink the complete ocean of ideas. If we take a sip from that ocean, we can experience the taste. This is our approach here. This session has revealed the research of Professor Sir Gary Cooper of the Global Wellbeing Agenda Council of World Economic Forum till now. Russell's comment about cooperation and the first step towards it lying in the hearts of individuals is important to us. What is the nature of this cooperation? How are human relations visualized? That's what cooperation signifies. Can such cooperation create well-being? Our Sahana Vavtu approach seeks it to transform individuals so that they can feel in their heart that well-being of others is as important as their personal well-being. This transformation of the human heart needs a transformation not only within students, but maybe in theory too. We saw Stanford Encyclopedia where it was saying your well-being concerns how well your life goes for you, and we can allow that my well-being depends on yours. without introducing the confusing notion that my well-being is constituted by yours, unquote. The significant comment of Professor Cooper that we should treat others as we would like our children to be treated clears the confusion, and theory's gate is opened to the idea that my well-being is constituted by yours. This now opens the gates of ideas of ancient wisdom also. How? So ancient wisdom's ideas find their way in theory through new evidence. The research in behavioral epigenetics is fascinating many. The environment is being investigated as a powerful influence on epigenetic tags and disease susceptibility. What about the environment of thoughts in which the mind lives? The research of behavioral scientists like Sarah Lazard of Harvard, Richard Davidson of Wisconsin, etc. prove the impact of wisdom practices on the density of gray matter and different level of activities in regions of the brain, etc. His Holiness the Dalai Lama for 30 years has worked with scientists, scholars and academicians in the Mind and Life Institute on such ideas. His Library of Tibetan Works and Archives has also worked with Emory University, USA to prepare a SEE curriculum which the university says is the future of education. His Eminence, Professor Samdong Rinpoche, is the chairperson of this Library of Tibetan Works and Archives which has collaborated with Emory University, USA. Other research is also there. The research of development biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, right from his Stanford days onwards, attracts the interest of some. The influence of belief on the development of genes and DNA is his area of research. He considers cells as miniature humans. Some say that it is now laying the foundation for a consciousness-based understanding of biology. Joseph Mercola, DO, founder of the world's most visited natural health website, finds his work an easy to understand explanation of how your emotions regulate your genetic expression, unquote. Dr. Deepak Chopra's work seeks to unlock the astonishing power of the DNA for optimum health and well-being, unquote. More examples exist. Those interested can search and you will find them. From our evidence to theory and practice of neuroplasticity, how do we merge ancient and modern wisdom? Every time you learn a new fact or skill, you change your brain. It's something we call neuroplasticity, Dr. Lara Boyd says. She also says, and I quote, behaviors that you employ in your everyday life are important. Each of them is changing your brain, unquote. Thus, our emphasis on ancient wisdom's practices and the philosophy that imparts security, not fear. Neuroplasticity studies the changes that occur in brain chemistry, structure and function. It recognizes both mature and developing brains are constantly reorganizing. All of us are doing it even as we hear and speak. The adaptive capacity of the brain is highly influenced by behavior. The brain is never at rest, even when we are doing nothing. We will see how ancient wisdom's practices utilize the time when nothing is done by meditation or recitation of sacred texts or names, etc. Will it alter the brain in three ways? Chemical, by neuron movement, altering the structure, and functional changes? This is yet to be researched, but Dr. Lara Boyd has found some other evidence. She concludes that adults who practiced Buddhist meditation significantly reduced cortisol and blood pressure in 6 weeks. She also finds evidence that a single session of aerobic exercise enhances learning. The National Library of Medicine has a review and a comparison of yoga. It states, and I quote, evidence suggests that yoga interventions appear to be equal and or superior to exercise in most outcome measures, unquote. Is this how learning was enhanced for thousands of years in ancient wisdom's practices? These questions may be relevant for curriculum design. So let's look at the current practices whose evidence may be leading to a new theory. Let's take the case study of the lead researcher of Apple, Steve Jobs. Like Edison earlier, his research transformed many industries. Personal microcomputers, portable laptops with innovative graphics, interface cinema with Pixar's animation, music with iTunes, iPhone, iPad, access to newspapers, books, movies, magazines, etc. His research has a strong focus on application. He had a unique ability to know the customer's needs. What created these unique abilities? How did he train his mind? He was known as a practitioner of inner search. Jeffrey James writes, and I quote, Steve Jobs used Zen mindfulness to train his brain, and that neuroscientists recently validated Jobs' theory about the business benefits of meditation. Unquote. Maybe this is evidence of the excellence that can be created by ancient wisdom's practices. But ancient wisdom is about goodness filled with excellence. This can only emerge from a gestalt of philosophy with practices. This philosophy, if not put into action, will be pointless. Excellence without goodness can create prosperity, but with social pain. The true impact of wisdom is felt only when goodness is added to excellence. So, there is evidence of the efficacy of ancient wisdom's practices which exists in modern theory. A study by Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School found that meditating for 30 minutes each day for 8 weeks found evidence of a thickened posterior cingulate, thereby increasing focus and self-confidence. We have mentioned that students need to be filled with self-confidence during education. Secondly, it also found evidence of thickened left hippocampus, thereby increasing the ability to regulate emotion, to learn and to remember. This creates excellence, regulates emotion. Third, evidence of thickened temporoparietal junction was also found. They concluded that this increases empathy, compassion and perspective, all of which leads to human goodness. It also shrank the amygdala, thereby decreasing stress and likelihood of a flight or fight response. A fear-based education system can possibly be reversed, as can be animal instincts in superiorly gifted humans. Education in ancient wisdom is designed to remove the last traces of animal instinct and bring out the refinement inherent in the human race. Thus, education enables artha, which is the second goal of life of ancient wisdom, whose true meaning is the declaration of distinction of humans from all other species. This distinction is expressed through excellence filled with goodness. Artha is commonly understood as business. Hence, the role of decreasing stress that Professor Cary Cooper researches merges with the end result that ancient wisdom seeks through its methodology. That modern science validates it is a good beginning. Behind techniques of ancient wisdom is a philosophy that should not be misused. Inner search ideas are being practiced in Silicon Valley. Why should education ignore them then? Why not direct these practices? Why not direct these ideas? Many Silicon Valley companies encourage employees to meditate. Sarah Lazar of Harvard researches its benefits. Techniques can build excellence, but wisdom seeks goodness. This does not come by simply asking people to be good. It needs an inner commitment built through Sahana Vavtu practices of speak the truth, follow righteous conduct, unity of thought, word and deed, expansion of human heart to include self-interest of others as part of one's own self-interest. This involves a lifestyle change which is best imparted in school years. That is why techniques like daily diary were used. Let us take a look at how current practices want to approach this goal. Will they succeed without a guiding philosophy being the very basis of their lifestyle? Is OECD right when it wants a change in attitude, for without that change in attitude, any such corporate goal may remain mere lip service. Google asks employees to work for an experience of not to do evil. Is this not the first step to ancient Indian principle of life? That is, help ever, hurt never? What attitude enables its sincere application? Will this not involve transformation of the human heart? Can it be achieved with a focus on sense perception? Without a change in the focus, the conflict that Stanford Encyclopedia points out will be the reality of sense perception that is shared by animal intelligence too. So what has happened? A lot of practices are changing slowly. The purpose of business now includes ideas of EQ, emotional quotient, ethics, soulful action, empathy, etc. These can create financial value and experiential, social and emotional value. Business and life can now be transformative, not just sensory experiences. So how do current ideas merge with ancient wisdom's practices? Why does social pain still exist despite these ideas being there, being practiced, companies claiming to use them? Why is social pain still existing? The Sahana Vavtu approach of ancient wisdom has many texts that elaborate the nature of cooperation that Russell talks of and the way one's well-being is constituted by well-being of others, as discussed by Professor Cary Cooper. Many other ideas and research results are also discussed. Why, despite these, does social pain exist? The answer lies in practices and underlying philosophy. The first practice is to speak the truth and follow righteous conduct. 2020 and 2008 were caused by the lack of knowing the truth of either the derivatives or the virus. The solution lies in a gestalt of philosophy and practice, the practice of righteous conduct. If righteous conduct was followed, these derivatives would never have been sold. The virus spread would have been restricted if everybody had done social distancing. So righteous conduct and truth are the basis of society. What should these practices be? This is explained in the next session. But what should the philosophy be? Let us sum it up in 2 lines. One of ancient wisdom's texts, the Purusha Suktam, gives it. The text can be summed up in simple words. It states that humans are a limb of society and society is a limb of nature. This text of ancient wisdom is taught, its practice is the goal. It links the well-being of all in society as being constituted as a whole. Probably this whole is a gestalt greater than the sum of separate parts of each individual's well-being. Not only is society considered as one whole, but it also links society to being a limb of nature. Thus, the idea of well-being is constituted by what is happening in nature too. Thus, not only is well-being constituted of all individuals in society, but includes nature. What a fantastic visualization. Hence, ancient wisdom's idea of well-being clears all confusion that is there in theory. It links what constitutes individuals' well-being with society's well-being very clearly. Its practices in education are designed to bring this about by transforming the heart of students. How does the mind and intellect have to be given inputs to transform the heart is the curriculum of ethics of ancient wisdom. We will have to wait for the next sessions to see how we fulfill this goal and how ancient wisdom fulfills this goal, and we try to understand and share it as a curriculum design. In the meantime, I thank you for your time and attention. Thank you so much.